Tell me, Barbie, did you see
Did I see what?
Men in Tights?
Yes. Now, I want to know, did you wear tights when you were directing? You made all the men wear tights.
No, because Richard Lewis kept complaining about his genital circulation.
For years, something about Robin Hood, Men in Tights, didn't quite add up. The laughs were real. The cast was electric. But behind the scenes, rumors swirled.
And ruining takes. We ruined a lot of takes. Mel ruined a lot.
Was there tension on set? Creative clashes? A studio unhappy with Mel Brooks's wild vision? Fans speculated, insiders hinted, but no one ever gave a straight answer. Now, decades later, Brooks has finally broken the silence. What he revealed isn't scandal, but it is surprising. Here's the real story of what went wrong, what went right, and why the set was nothing like you'd expect. The comedy that refused to die. Here's the kicker. The big reveal? It's not a scandal, a feud, or a lost scene buried in a vault somewhere in Culver City. The truth, as Mel Brooks himself has now reaffirmed in a series of interviews and retrospectives, is beautifully simple. The set of Men in Tights was exactly what it looked like on screen. Absurd, collaborative, and joyfully chaotic in all the best ways. Brooks, confirmed, was a kind of anti-bombshell. He described a happy set, full of seasoned comic actors, young upstarts, spontaneous riffs, and a director, himself, who encouraged laughter as much behind the camera as in front of it. In a time when every modern making-of story seems to involve some form of on-set meltdown, it turns out Robin Hood, Men in Tights, was refreshingly scandal-free. That's the real surprise. Robin Hood, Men in Tights didn't have to suffer to be funny. It didn't have to chew through actors or implode under the weight of its own ambition. In fact, what Brooks confirmed was that it thrived precisely because it didn't take itself too seriously, on screen or off. That, in its own quiet way, might just be the biggest twist of all. So, why Men in Tights? By the early 90s, Mel Brooks had become a master of the genre spoof. Westerns got the Blazing Saddles treatment, classic horror found new life in Young Frankenstein, and even the galaxy far, far away wasn't safe from Brooks's sharp comedic scalpel in Spaceballs. But while each film poked fun at a specific genre, they all did something more. They honored the original source with love, even as they tore it apart with gags. So, when Brooks turned his attention to Robin Hood, it wasn't out of nowhere. In fact, he'd already done it once and failed. In 1975, Brooks co-created a short-lived TV sitcom called When Things Were Rotten, a slapstick series centered on Robin Hood and his band of merry men. It aired on ABC, ran for just 13 episodes, and despite having Brooks's fingerprints all over it, the show simply didn't land with audiences. Critics panned it. Viewers bailed. The project was quietly buried. But Brooks, in typical fashion, didn't see it as a loss. He saw it as a dry run. Nearly 2 decades later, in 1991, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves hit theaters. Starring Kevin Costner and his suspiciously American accent, the film was a major box office success, even if critics were split. It was melodramatic, lushly produced, and sincere to a fault, which, for Mel Brooks, was like a flashing red beacon that read, "Parody me." Brooks later joked that the idea for Men in Tights came to him the second Costner opened his mouth. "He's supposed to be Robin of Locksley, and he sounds like he's from Anaheim," he said in an interview. The opportunity was irresistible. Not only could he take another stab at spoofing Robin Hood, but this time he had something specific and culturally relevant to lampoon. He also had better tools. The success of Spaceballs and History of the World, Part 1 meant Brooks had more clout, more resources, and access to a wider talent pool. This wouldn't be a rushed TV experiment. It would be a full-blown film, with musical numbers, sword fights, and a cheeky sense of self-awareness. If Prince of Thieves was Hollywood's high-budget attempt at reviving the legend, Men in Tights would be Brooks' playful, low-stakes rebellion. But even parody requires structure, and Brooks knew the Robin Hood legend well. The bones of the story stayed intact. Robin returns from the Crusades, finds his land taken, allies with the poor, falls for Maid Marian, and eventually defeats the evil sheriff. What changed was everything around the story. The details, the timing, the delivery. This wasn't just a spoof of Prince of Thieves. It was a spoof of every Robin Hood adaptation that took itself too seriously. From Errol Flynn's swashbuckling to BBC serials to 80s made-for-TV versions, Brooks was skewering an entire cultural institution, and he was having a blast doing it. More importantly, he was inviting the audience in on the joke. Every time a character broke the fourth wall, winked at the camera, or referenced modern pop culture in a medieval setting, it was Brooks's way of saying, "We know this is ridiculous, and that's exactly the point." What started as a second chance at a failed sitcom soon became something much bigger. A chance for Brooks to reclaim a story he'd never really let go of. He didn't just want to mock Robin Hood, he wanted to own him. On-set chemistry. Mel Brooks has always had a knack for casting, not just picking funny actors, but finding the right kind of funny for the right kind of absurd. Men in Tights was no exception. With a mix of old pros, up-and-comers, and some surprising choices, the cast became one of the strongest elements of the film. And much like the movie itself, the way they came together was equal parts planned and wonderfully unpredictable. When Brooks set out to find his Robin Hood, he wanted someone who could act dashing and self-aware at the same time. The hero needed to look like he walked out of a romance novel, but also be funny, smart, and willing to look ridiculous. Cary Elwes was the obvious choice. After all, he had just played Westley in The Princess Bride, a role that walked that exact tightrope. But Elwes wasn't convinced. When Mel Brooks first called to offer him the role, Elwes thought it was a prank. Specifically, he thought it was Jim Carrey impersonating Brooks, playing a joke on him. He hung up. Twice. Eventually, Brooks got through, and once Elwes realized it was the real Mel on the line, he agreed to meet and then quickly signed on. For Elwes, the draw wasn't just the role. It was the chance to work with a living legend. "I grew up on Mel Brooks movies," he later said in interviews. "To get to be in one was surreal." And it paid off. Elwes brought charm, timing, and a genuine sense of joy to the part. His chemistry with the rest of the cast, particularly Chappelle and Richard Lewis, helped ground the film's chaos. He played Robin with a straight face, even when delivering lines like, "Unlike some other Robin Hoods, I can speak with an English accent," a direct jab at Costner. But Elwes wasn't just a pretty face. He had actual sword-fighting experience from The Princess Bride, and he put it to use here, helping choreograph scenes and support less experienced cast members during training sessions. If there's one casting decision that has aged like fine wine, it's Dave Chappelle. At just 19 years old, Chappelle had never done a film. He was doing stand-up comedy in New York, trying to get noticed. Brooks saw him audition and liked him, but wasn't fully convinced. It was Cary Elwes who pushed hardest to get him the part of Achoo, Robin's loyal sidekick. "I had to fight Mel on that," Elwes recalled, "but I knew Dave had something. He walked in the room and owned it." Chappelle's natural timing and charisma lit up the screen. Whether riffing on modern slang or delivering absurd one-liners, he felt effortless. His now famous bit, "Achoo, bless you," wasn't in the script. It was an ad-lib, one of many that made the final cut. Off-camera, Chappelle was young and a bit green, but well-liked. Brooks would later say that Dave reminded him of a young Richard Pryor, sharp, unpredictable, and clearly destined for something bigger. He was right. In perhaps the most Richard Lewis casting story ever, the neurotic comedian reportedly only agreed to play Prince John on the condition that he would never have to ride a horse. Brooks, of course, said yes, then leaned into it. Lewis's version of Prince John is a modern-day diva trapped in medieval tights, whiny, sarcastic, and hopelessly out of place. He was a perfect foil to Elwes's cool-headed Robin, and their scenes together became highlights of the film. Supporting legends, Roger Rees, who played the Sheriff of Rottingham, brought a Shakespearean energy to his absurd villain. With a delivery that walked the line between menace and complete nonsense, Rees elevated every scene he was in, especially when fumbling over malapropisms like, "A chastity belt? That's going to chafe my willy." Tracy Ullman, as the witch-like latrine, leaned fully into the grotesque, chewing scenery with absolute glee. Her chemistry with Rees was electric, especially during their cringy but hilarious flirtation scenes, many of which were heavily improvised. And then, of course, there was Mel Brooks himself, stepping in as Rabbi Tuckman, a nod to Friar Tuck, but with a distinctly Jewish twist. It was classic Mel, silly, self-aware, and completely willing to poke fun at stereotypes. Behind the scenes, the cast gelled quickly. There were no major fights, no creative egos clashing. Everyone, from the leads to the extras, seemed to understand what kind of movie they were making. Something silly, fun, and built on collaboration. Brooks encouraged improvisation, and the actors ran with it. The atmosphere was described as campy theater with a budget. Between rehearsed sword fighting, musical numbers, and the occasional on-set prank, it felt more like summer camp than a studio project. And that camaraderie showed on screen. For a film filled with fart jokes, flaming arrows, and characters named Latrine, Robin Hood, Men in Tights boasts some surprisingly sharp action sequences. It might be easy to assume that the fight scenes were all a joke, and in many ways they were. But Mel Brooks wasn't one to cut corners. If he was going to parody swashbuckling heroes, he wanted the swashbuckling to look legit. And so, tucked between pratfalls and punchlines, there's some real swordplay in Men in Tights. Not just parody of action, but parody through action. While the swordplay was grounded in real technique, some weapons were not. The art of comedy. In the film's archery tournament scene, Robin is given a second chance thanks to a deus ex machina. He literally pulls out the movie script and points out that he's entitled to another shot. The crowd agrees, and he launches a heat-seeking Patriot arrow that twists and turns through the air before hitting the bullseye. It's absurd, it's modern, and it's exactly the kind of anachronism that Brooks specialized in. But even in this moment of cartoonish nonsense, there's care in the execution. The VFX team created a convincing arc for the arrow, at least by early 90s standards, and the slow-motion shot of Elwes letting it fly was filmed with the same seriousness you'd see in Braveheart. Brooks didn't want to half-bake anything, not even a flying joke missile. Slapstick was a cornerstone of Brooks's style, going all the way back to the producers and silent movie. In Men in Tights, it shows up everywhere, from the exaggerated sound effects during duels to the absurdly elaborate brawls involving frying pans, broomsticks, and the occasional old man wandering through the background unnoticed. One standout moment involves Robin and the Sheriff of Rottingham dueling inside the royal banquet hall. Chairs are smashed, tables flipped, and the sheriff, mid-fight, shouts the self-referential line, "You've lost your arms, but you haven't lost your dignity," just as he's tackled through a serving cart. Another example is the iconic scene with Blinken, the blind servant, who attempts to catch Robin's return to the castle but crashes headlong into a tree. The physical gag is played entirely straight. There's no music sting, no camera zoom, just deadpan impact, followed by a polite, "Master Robin." It's a moment of pure Brooksian timing. Let's not forget that Men in Tights is, technically, a musical. That means many of the actors weren't just swinging swords. They were dancing, singing, and performing choreographed routines while in full costume. The titular number, Men in Tights, features synchronized movement with tights snapping, feet stomping, and canes twirling. The ensemble rehearsed the number for weeks, treating it like a Broadway routine. Some actors admitted in interviews that the musical numbers were harder to get through than the fight scenes. "You can fake a sword swing," one joked, "but you can't fake rhythm." Yet Brooks, ever the perfectionist, insisted they keep practicing until the dance routines matched the film's chaotic yet precise tone. The result? A musical number so iconic that it became the film's brand, even its tagline, "Iconic scenes, how they happened." Ask any fan of Robin Hood, Men in Tights to quote a favorite scene, and you're likely to get a different answer every time. That's because the film is packed with memorable moments, each one balancing slapstick, parody, and a little bit of Mel Brooks' trademark mayhem. Some were planned to the beat, others came alive thanks to improv and creative spontaneity on set. Let's pull back the curtain on a few of the most enduring highlights. Unlike some other Robin Hoods, this is the line. The one that most people, even those who haven't seen the movie, have heard at some point. Unlike some other Robin Hoods, I can speak with an English accent. It lands with a wink and a jab. Specifically, a jab at Kevin Costner's Prince of Thieves performance, in which he famously made no attempt to hide his American accent. The joke was such a direct hit that it became the film's calling card, even appearing in trailers and posters. What's interesting is that this line wasn't in the original draft of the script. It was added during a table read, after someone, allegedly Elwes himself, cracked the joke during a discussion about Robin Hood adaptations. Brooks loved it, and made sure it stayed in the final cut. Fun side note, the line had to be adapted in international versions. In the German dub, for example, it became a joke about diction and phrasing, since the Costner reference wouldn't have landed quite the same. A parody of Prince of Thieves' dramatic tournament scene, this sequence goes full Brooks, mocking cinematic tropes, breaking the fourth wall, and including possibly the dumbest and most delightful plot twist ever: a heat-seeking patriot arrow. When Robin misses his shot, and all seems lost, he suddenly shouts, "Wait! I get another shot!" The crowd protests. Robin calmly pulls out the script and reads from it. It says right here, "I get another shot." I get another shot! The scene freezes, literally, and the camera zooms in on the script in Robin's hands. It's as if the world itself has to comply with the written page. Brooks loved this meta-joke so much that he staged the camera movement to make it seem overly dramatic, like a courtroom reveal. The production even printed fake, oversized scripts for Elwes to hold, just for the visual gag. The sequence ends with the Patriot arrow zigzagging through the air like a cartoon missile before nailing the bullseye. It was done with a mix of practical effects and early CGI, cheesy by today's standards, but hilarious in its sheer audacity. Poor Blinken. The blind family servant was responsible for several of the film's most absurd sight gags, but none hit quite like his entrance. As Robin returns to his family home, Blinken excitedly calls out and walks directly into a tree at full speed. There's no music cue, no flashy editing, just a blunt collision and a polite, "Master Robin?" The joke's effectiveness is in its simplicity. Mel Brooks instructed actor Mark Blankfield to play it with dignity, trusting that the dry delivery would make the physical comedy land even harder. And it did. Interestingly, the tree gag was rehearsed dozens of times, not because the timing was tricky, but because everyone kept breaking into laughter before the camera rolled. When Tracy Ullman as Latrine and Roger Rees as the Sheriff of Rottingham appear in scenes together, things get weird, in the best way. Their flirtation is grotesque, uncomfortable, and completely magnetic. One particularly bizarre exchange about how Latrine changed her name from Shithouse was half scripted and half improvised. Brooks gave Ullman and Rees the green light to go as far as they wanted, as long as the scene stayed technically PG-13. What they came up with was so odd and perfectly over the top, it became one of the film's cult favorite interactions. You can actually see Ullman nearly break character in a few takes. Her wig shakes from suppressed laughter. One of the most delightfully stupid scenes in the film occurs when Little John, played by the physically imposing Eric Allen Kramer, challenges Robin to a duel on a rickety wooden bridge. They fight with long staffs, as tradition demands, but the fight ends when Little John falls into the stream below and begins to panic, flailing, gasping, calling for help, until Robin wades in and realizes the water is only about 2 feet deep. Brooks said the joke worked because we expect brawn to mean bravery. Watching this hulking man thrash around like a child in a kiddie pool flipped that expectation on its head. The scene was filmed in a controlled outdoor set, with water warmed just enough for comfort, though the cast joked that the mud smelled like sadness. Brooks. Behind the camera. It's tempting to imagine a Mel Brooks movie set as pure bedlam, a bunch of comedians throwing pies and yelling punchlines at each other until someone yells "cut." And sure, there was laughter, improvisation, and more than a few ruined takes due to actors cracking up. But the truth is, Mel Brooks ran a tight, pun very much intended, ship. If anything, Brooks directed with the precision of a choreographer, one who happened to wear Groucho glasses and throw in the occasional fart joke. Robin Hood. Men in Tights wasn't chaos for chaos's sake. It was highly controlled lunacy. Every beat, no matter how silly, had structure. And every actor, no matter how goofy, had a job to do. By the time Men in Tights went into production, Mel Brooks had already spent decades refining his rhythm as a director. He knew the secret to great comedy wasn't just in the writing, it was in timing, pace, and performance control. This was especially true with parody, where jokes need to land both as satire and as entertainment. On set, Brooks was known for being very hands-on with actors' delivery. He would adjust a punchline by milliseconds, testing phrasing and pace until the laugh landed just right. He directed comedy the way a music producer might fine-tune a track, repeating takes not for perfection, but for maximum effect. He also wasn't above stepping into scenes himself to demonstrate what he wanted. Cary Elwes once said that Brooks would act out entire scenes for the cast if he felt the energy was lagging, doing full line readings, exaggerated expressions, and sound effects, much to everyone's delight. Unlike some modern comedy directors who let actors riff endlessly, Brooks believed in guided improvisation. He welcomed improv, but only when it served the scene. Dave Chappelle, new to film acting at the time, was given space to experiment with his character, Achu. Brooks loved Chappelle's timing, but would rein things in if they wandered too far off book. "He gave me room," Chappelle later said, "but he also gave me shape." Similarly, Tracy Ullman and Roger Rees were encouraged to build on their bizarre chemistry as Latrine and the Sheriff, but Brooks would cut if things felt indulgent or derailed the flow of the scene. What made his method work was trust. The cast knew that Brooks, though deeply silly, was in control. He wasn't guessing, he had a vision. And he was able to create a sandbox where performers could play, but not get lost. One of Brooks's greatest talents was juggling different tones within the same movie. In Men in Tights, you'll find razor-sharp satire sitting side by side with groan-worthy puns, slapstick falls, romantic beats, and absurd musical numbers. And somehow, it all works. Brooks managed this by staying true to the emotional center of the story. Even when the jokes got outrageous, the structure of Robin Hood's journey remained intact. Robin is still the good guy. Marion is still noble. The sheriff is still evil. The story never becomes so ridiculous that we stop